Rick Bell is a columnist for the Calgary Sun, and Alex Boyd is a national reporter for the Toronto Star, and they're both in Calgary. Thank you both for joining us. Alex, I'd like to start with you, if I could. What's your reaction to what Premier Kenney just said? I mean, he went through some pretty conspiratorial Facebook posts as a justification for him staying on. What's your take?
I mean, it feels very 2020 that I have to say this at all, but I mean, misinformation, it's a very bad thing. We should all be very concerned about its impact on politics. He's not wrong about the rise of vitriolic, hateful posts online. But at the same time, my read on that is he seems to be conflating that with people like Brian Sheen, who are longtime politicians who have, criticisms of his leadership that a lot of people in Alberta feel are very, very legitimate. So to try to kind of tie those 2 points together feels a little disingenuous, not to mention that Kenney himself, is very quick to call out the mainstream media. The Twitter account associated with his leadership campaign was all over Twitter today, calling out a CBC story for being, state-funded media. And so, is he the ideal poster child to be calling out online misinformation? I'm not sure he is.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, it's his voice. They're not disputing the authenticity of the audio, and it comes after, a series of other stories, revelations about the kamikaze candidate from the leadership race, this delay in the leadership vote. But you heard him there. He's like the little Dutch boy of Alberta politics. If he leaves, the dam breaks, is the way he's kind of framing it.
Yeah.
Well, of course,
Oh, sorry, Rick hop in first. Yeah.
Okay, and the recording that that CBC obtained, he has been saying this all across the province. He's up the rhetoric. Now we're getting into lunatics and asylums and kooks and bigots, and so the language is getting more and more ferocious. But in reality, he's been pitching this for weeks, that this is the savior who is going to save us from all of these incredibly nasty, horrific, hateful people.
Right.
And he should know better. This double down that he did today is absolutely, unadulteratingly pathetic.
Okay.
Because how can you say, oh, there are a few people that have signed up and might go to a vote in Red Deer, and ergo, the people that are dissatisfied with my leadership within my party are X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. One person he didn't cite that I just talked to is the MLA, the member of the legislature for the area Jason Kenney represented for 19 years in Ottawa. And he says the people the premier is calling lunatics are in fact longtime conservatives who've always voted conservative and voted for Jason Kenney for 19 years. They weren't lunatics then.
Okay.
They weren't kooky then. They weren't wanting to run the asylum then. And what about all the people he brought together? And what about all the people he brought together to make up the UCP from both parties? What about them? He wasn't questioning them at that point when it was in his favor. But now when he doesn't have the trust of most Albertans, when his personal popularity is in the 30% range, now, and when a whole bunch of people were signed up to go to Red Deer, and most of the smart money was saying he could have lost, now and only now.
Okay, I got to jump in, Rick. I got to jump in. You're like a locomotion, and I say that with love.
I know.
All right, but
that guy gets me mad.
All right, I just want to play a little clip, and I'm going to go to Alex out of this. This is a clip from the recording. This is why we're all saying lunatic on live TV. Have a listen to this.
What's the easiest path for me? Just to take a walk. I don't need this job. I could go to the private sector, have my evenings or weekends off. The lunatics are trying to take over the asylum. And I'm not going to let them. I will not let that happen. I will not let this mainstream Conservative Party become an agent for extreme, hateful, intolerant, bigoted, and crazy views.
Okay, so Alex, when you want to keep running the asylum, is it a good idea to call the members of that asylum lunatics as he's doing? And what does it say about Jason Kenney's control of the party that people are recording him and leaking it like this?
I mean, you got to think that if you're a staffer anywhere in the vicinity of Jason Kenney these days, you're a little bit nervous that someone might secretly be recording that. So I can't imagine what this is doing for trust. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, it feels like ancient history now, but Kenney was the guy who came back to Alberta. He gathered up all the right wing, he, banded it together. He rode it to power. And so it's really interesting that what we're seeing right now is kind of the untethering of those two sides of Alberta politics. And so when he says that, I think he's speaking very deliberately to those folks in Alberta who maybe, are used to voting Conservative, really aligned themselves with the old progressive Conservatives, but have been a little bit uncomfortable with kind of those two sides coming together for the last couple of years. And so, that is very much a signal to the traditional Alberta voter, those who, again, maybe are less comfortable with the Lake of Fire, which it's worth pointing out was a Wildrose candidate, which was one of the parties that Kenney banded together. So that,
right.
Is part of the faction of that existing party. But that's him speaking to, again, that kind of mainstream Alberta political voter that it seems like he's hoping is going to save him in this upcoming leadership review.
Okay, Rick, and just we quick because we're tight on time here, but this recording was done by our colleague Elise Von Shield. She obtained a copy of the recording. What are people saying to you now, Rick, about how this affects Kenney's ability to survive this leadership vote?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of them think Kenney will now survive the leadership vote because he's changed the format of the leadership vote, which we don't have the time to go into, but he's gone from an in-person vote to a mail-in ballot, which a lot of people think is much harder to make secure. As far as the people within his party who are upset with him, and I'm talking about very reasonable, principled people who are upset with him, they're not surprised, but they are still disgusted. And he is pushing it away. And one thing they said, which was interesting, is he is also giving ammo to the main opposition party, Rachel Notley's NDP, because what he's really saying is, if I lose this leadership review, this will be proof that the UCP is a haven for the lunatics. And guess who is going to use that ammunition, I'm sure, very effectively?
No, Rachel Notley and them, Alex, I'm sure are cutting ads. And with all of this, we've got about 30 seconds, Alex. I mean, does this sink Jason Kenney, or is the shift to a mail-in vote procedurally, is that enough to save him?
I think it could. I mean, regardless of what you think of his leadership, he's one of the best organizers in the country. And as Rick has already said, the fact that he's aiming for 50+1 could be enough for him to sneak in. But again, if he wins with 51% support, you could argue that, again, the real winner here will be Rachel Notley. Yeah,
51% is a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, right? You want 65, 70% before you can say, it's not a math test. All right. Alex Boyd, Rick Bell, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll check back in if more stuff happens in Alberta politics.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.